Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
Picture this. You've been grinding for months, sweating over spreadsheets, pulling all-nighters, and kissing enough corporate ass to make a donkey jealous. All for one shot. A $5 million deal that could change your life. And then, your boss, the queen of condescension, looks you dead in the eye and says, "Why bring trash?" LOL. Yeah, that happened. But here's the kicker. I knew something she didn't. The client CEO? That's my brother. And when I smiled and said, "Good luck in the meeting," I meant every damn word. It was a Tuesday morning, and the office was buzzing like a beehive on steroids. Ethan Carter, was sitting at my desk, staring at my screen like it held the secrets of the universe. In a way, it did. Novatech, one of the biggest tech companies in the country, was about to sign a deal that would make or break my career. $5 million. That's not just a number, it's a life changer. A house, a car, maybe even a vacation where I didn't have to check my email every 5 minutes. But there was one problem. Victoria Sterling, my boss. Picture Cruella de Vil, but with a sharper tongue and a wardrobe that screamed, "I make more money than you." She'd been riding me hard on this deal, micromanaging every email, every call, every damn comma in the proposal. And now, as I sat there, waiting for her to approve my travel request, I could feel the tension in the air like a storm about to break. "Ethan, my office." "Now." Her voice cut through the hum of the office like a knife. I grabbed my laptop and walked in, trying to keep my cool. She was sitting behind her desk, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping away at her keyboard like she was composing the next great American novel. "Victoria, I just need your approval for the flight to Novatech. The meeting's in 2 days, and She held up a hand, silencing me mid-sentence. "Why would I book your flight, Ethan? You're not going." I blinked. "What do you mean I'm not going? I've been working on this deal for months. I know every detail, every number, every what?" She interrupted, leaning back in her chair with a smirk. "Every excuse? Every failure? Let's be real, Ethan. You're not exactly what I'd call essential to this deal." I felt my face heat up. "With all due respect, Victoria, this deal wouldn't even be on the table if it weren't for me." She laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made my stomach twist. "Oh, please. You're just a guy who sends emails. Why bring trash to a 5-star meeting?" "LOL. Yeah." She actually said LOL out loud, like she was texting her BFF instead of talking to a grown-ass man who'd been busting his ass for her company. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my laptop across the room and tell her exactly what I thought of her. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled, because I knew something she didn't. Novatech's CEO, Daniel Carter, that's my brother. We hadn't spoken in years, not since the fallout over our dad's estate. But blood is blood, and when I saw his name on the client list 6 months ago, I knew this deal was my ticket to proving Victoria wrong. I kept it quiet, of course. No one at the office knew about my connection to Daniel. And now, as I stood there, watching Victoria pack her designer bag for the meeting she thought she was going to crush, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction. "Good luck in the meeting," I said, my voice calm, my smile steady. She paused, giving me a look that was equal parts confusion and disdain. "Luck? I don't need luck, Ethan. I've got this." "Sure you do," I replied, turning to leave. "But just remember, sometimes trash has a way of surprising you." As I walked back to my desk, I could feel the weight of what was about to happen settling over me like a storm cloud. Victoria thought she was walking into a negotiation. What she didn't know was that she was walking into a reckoning. And I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when she realized it. What would you do if your boss insulted you like that? Would you confront them? Or would you play the long game like Ethan? Let me know in the comments. Victoria left for the meeting the next morning, her heels clicking against the polished office floor like a metronome ticking down to disaster. She didn't even glance my way as she walked out, her designer suitcase rolling behind her like a loyal pet. I sat at my desk, pretending to be engrossed in my emails, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying her words in my head. "Why bring trash?" Oh, well, it wasn't just the insult. It was the way she said it, like I was nothing more than a speck of dust on her perfectly tailored blazer. But I wasn't dust. I was the storm she didn't see coming. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from Daniel. Just 2 words, "She's here." I smirked. The game was on. Victoria's meeting with Daniel was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp. I imagined her walking into Novatech's sleek, glass-walled headquarters, her confidence radiating like a force field. She'd probably rehearsed her pitch 100 times, polished her PowerPoint until it sparkled, and memorized every statistic to throw at him. But none of that would matter, Because Daniel wasn't just any CEO, he was my brother. And he knew exactly who Victoria was. I spent the morning trying to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, hoping it was Daniel with an update. Instead, it was just spam emails and group chat notifications. By noon, I was pacing the office kitchen, pretending to refill my coffee cup for the third time. Then, at 12:47 p.m., my phone lit up with a call from Daniel. I ducked into the stairwell to answer it. "Well," I said, my heart pounding. Daniel's voice was calm, almost amused. "She's exactly how you described her. Arrogant, condescending, completely unprepared." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "What happened?" "She walked in like she owned the place," Daniel said. Started her pitch, but I cut her off. Asked her why she didn't bring the guy who'd been handling the deal from the start. You should have seen her face, Ethan. She looked like I'd slapped her. I laughed, the sound echoing off the stairwell walls. "What did she say?" "She tried to play it off," Daniel said. "Said you weren't essential to the deal." So I asked her to explain the numbers. She stumbled through it, got half of them wrong. I told her I'd think about it and sent her on her way. I leaned against the wall, a grin spreading across my face. "You're a legend, Daniel." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "This is just the beginning. What do you want to do next?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to go nuclear, expose Victoria for the fraud she was, take her job, and watch her crash and burn. But another part of me wondered if that made me just as bad as her. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'll figure it out." When Victoria returned to the office that afternoon, she was a different person. The confidence was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped frown and a stormy aura that made everyone steer clear of her. She marched straight to her office and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stayed at my desk, pretending to work, but I could feel her eyes on me through the glass. She knew something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And that was the beauty of it. She had no idea what was coming. At 4:30 p.m., she called me into her office. I walked in, my expression neutral, and closed the door behind me. "Sit," she said, her voice clipped. I sat. She leaned forward, her elbows on the desk, her fingers steepled like she was about to deliver a sermon. "What do you know about Daniel Carter?" I raised an eyebrow. "The CEO of Novatech?" "Not much." "Why?" She studied me, her eyes narrowing. "He asked about you. Wanted to know why you weren't at the meeting." I shrugged. "I told you didn't book my flight." Her jaw tightened. "Don't play dumb with me, Ethan. What's your connection to him?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "No connection. Maybe he just appreciates people who know what they're talking about." She slammed her hand on the desk, making me jump. "Don't mess with me, Ethan. If you're hiding something, I'll find out." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Good luck with that, Victoria. But while you're digging, maybe ask yourself why Daniel Carter didn't sign the deal today. Maybe it's not me you should be worried about." I walked out before she could respond, my heart racing, but my head held high. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day in my mind. I'd won the first round, but the fight wasn't over. Victoria wasn't the type to back down, and neither was I. But as I drifted off to sleep, one question kept nagging at me. How far was I willing to go to win? Victoria was digging for answers. And when she found them, the real battle would begin. The next morning, the office felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. Victoria was already in her glass-walled fishbowl of an office, her face buried in her laptop, but I could feel the tension radiating off her like heat waves. She didn't look up when I walked past, but I knew she was aware of me. She was always aware. I settled at my desk, trying to focus on the mountain of emails in my inbox, but my mind kept drifting back to Daniel's call. He'd given me the upper hand, but I wasn't sure how to use it. Part of me wanted to confront Victoria, to throw her words back in her face and watch her squirm. But another part of me, the smarter part, knew that patience was key. If I played this right, I could come out on top without burning the place down. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "She's digging. Be careful." I frowned. Digging how? I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because a second later, Victoria's voice cut through the office like a whip. "Ethan, my office. Now." I stood, smoothing my tie and taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. When I walked in, she was standing by the window, her arms crossed, her back to me. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and the silence was deafening. "Close the door," she said finally, her voice low and dangerous. I did as I was told, then turned to face her. "What's up, Victoria?" She spun around, her eyes blazing. "Cut the crap, Ethan. I know you're hiding something. What's your connection to Daniel Carter?" I kept my face neutral, but my heart was pounding. I already told you I don't have a connection. She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the floor like a countdown to disaster. Don't lie to me. I did some digging last night. Your last name is Carter. His last name is Carter. Coincidence? I don't think so. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. It's a common name. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nice try. But I'm not stupid, Ethan. You've been playing me this whole time, haven't you? Feeding me just enough to keep me off your back while you worked your little scheme behind the scenes. I didn't respond. What could I say? She was right, but admitting it would only make things worse. She took another step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, your connection to Daniel, what you've been planning, all of it. And if you don't, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I stared at her, my mind racing. I could feel the walls closing in, the noose tightening around my neck. But then, something inside me snapped. You want the truth, Victoria? Fine. Daniel Carter is my brother. We haven't spoken in years, but when I saw his name on the client list, I knew this was my chance to prove you wrong. To prove that I'm not just some trash you can throw away whenever it suits you. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. I kept going, my voice rising with every word. You think you're untouchable, but you're not. You're just a bully who's been riding on other people's hard work for too long. And if you think I'm going to let you ruin my career over this, you're dead wrong. For a moment, she just stared at me, her face unreadable. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Looks like the trash has a backbone after all. Too bad it's not going to save you. She walked back to her desk and picked up her phone. Security. My office. Now. My stomach dropped. What are you doing? She didn't answer. Instead, she sat down, her eyes never leaving mine. 2 minutes later, security arrived. Ethan thought he had the upper hand. But Victoria had one last card to play, and it was a game changer. The two security guards stood in the doorway, their presence looming like a thundercloud. One of them, a broad-shouldered guy with a buzz cut, stepped forward. You called Miss Sterling? Victoria didn't take her eyes off me. Yes. Escort Mr. Carter out of the building. He's no longer employed here. My heart skipped a beat. You can't do this. She smirked. Watch me. The guards moved toward me, their expressions neutral, but their intentions clear. I held up my hands, my mind racing. Wait. Just wait. You're making a mistake. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her smirk widening. The only mistake I made was trusting you. Now get out before I have you arrested for trespassing. I looked at the guards, then back at her. There was no reasoning with her, not when she was like this. So I did the only thing I could do. I walked out. The guards flanked me as I made my way through the office, my face burning under the stares of my co-workers. I could hear the whispers as I passed, the muffled gasps and muttered questions. What did he do? Why is he leaving? I didn't answer. I just kept walking, my head held high, until we reached the elevator. The guards stepped back, their job done, and I rode down to the lobby alone. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the bright sunlight, blinking against the glare. For a moment, I just stood there, my mind blank, my chest tight. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out to see a text from Daniel. What happened? I typed back, my fingers trembling. She fired me. His response came almost immediately. Meet me at the usual spot. We need to talk. The usual spot was a dive bar a few blocks from Novatech's headquarters. It was where we'd met a handful of times over the past 6 months, always in secret, always to discuss the deal. But this time felt different. This time it wasn't just about the deal. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 glasses of whiskey in front of him. He slid one toward me as I sat down. Rough day? He asked, his tone light, but his eyes serious. I picked up the glass and took a long sip, the burn of the alcohol grounding me. You could say that. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Tell me everything. So I did. I told him about Victoria's threats, about her digging into my past, about the way she'd had me escorted out of the building like a criminal. By the time I finished, my glass was empty, and my hands were clenched into fists. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I was done, he leaned back and let out a low whistle. She's something else, isn't she? That's one way to put it, I muttered. He studied me for a moment, then said, What do you want to do? I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, this is your call. You're the one she screwed over. So what do you want to do about it? I hesitated. Part of me wanted revenge, to take everything from her the way she'd tried to take everything from me. But another part of me just wanted to move on, to put this whole mess behind me and start fresh? I don't know, I admitted. Daniel nodded, like he'd expected that answer. Well, here's what I think. You've got two options. Option 1, you walk away. You let her win, and you start over somewhere else. Option 2, you fight back. You use what you know to take her down, and you make sure she never does this to anyone else. I stared at him, my mind racing. And if I choose option 2? He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then I'll help you. But make no mistake, Ethan, this won't be easy. And it won't be pretty. I looked down at my empty glass, the weight of his words settling over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Victoria, about the way she treated people, about the damage she'd done and would continue to do if someone didn't stop her. I took a deep breath, then looked up at Daniel. Let's do it. Ethan and Daniel were about to take on Victoria. But even they didn't know how far she'd go to protect her empire. The next few days were a blur of strategy sessions, late-night phone calls, and restless sleep. Daniel and I met at the bar every evening, mapping out our plan like generals preparing for war. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Victoria had been getting away with her toxic behavior for years, and it was time someone held her accountable. But as the days passed, I started to notice something strange. Victoria wasn't just sitting back and waiting for us to make our move. She was fighting back. It started with small things, a rumor here, a whisper there. People at the office began giving me sideways glances when I walked by, their conversations cutting off abruptly as I approached. Then came the emails. The first one arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as I was sitting down with my coffee. The subject line read, "Urgent. Misconduct investigation." My stomach dropped as I opened it. Asterisk, "Dear Mr. Carter, this is to inform you that your former employer, Sterling Tech, has initiated an investigation into allegations of professional misconduct during your tenure. Please be advised that any further contact with current employees or clients of Sterling Tech will be considered a violation of the non-disclosure agreement you signed upon termination. Sincerely, Legal Team, Sterling Tech, asterisk." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. Misconduct? What the hell was she talking about? I called Daniel immediately. "She's trying to scare me," I said as soon as he picked up. "She's making up lies to keep me quiet." Daniel was silent for a moment, then said, "It's worse than that. She's not just trying to scare you. She's trying to discredit you. If she can make you look like the bad guy, no one will believe anything you say about her." I sank into my chair, my mind racing. What do we do? "We stick to the plan," Daniel said firmly. "But we need to move faster. If she's already launching investigations, she's not going to stop there." The next day, Daniel and I met with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire who specialized in corporate whistleblower cases. She listened intently as we laid out everything we knew about Victoria's unethical behavior, from her manipulation of sales numbers to her bullying of employees. "This is good," Claire said when we finished. "But it's not enough. If we're going to take her down, we need hard evidence. Emails, documents, anything that proves she knew what she was doing was wrong." I nodded, my mind already working. "I can get that. I still have access to some of the company's servers." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That's risky. If they catch you, it could backfire." "It's a risk I'm willing to take," I said. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. "You're not doing this alone. We're in this together, remember?" That night, I sat at my computer, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I knew what I was about to do could get me into serious trouble, but I didn't care. Victoria had pushed me too far, and I wasn't going to let her win. I logged into the company server using an old admin account I'd forgotten to deactivate. The system recognized me immediately, and within minutes, I was scrolling through hundreds of emails, searching for anything that could help our case. And then I found it. A chain of emails between Victoria and the CFO discussing how to manipulate the quarterly earnings report to make the company look more profitable than it was. My heart raced as I read through them, my excitement growing with every word. This was it, the smoking gun we needed. I downloaded the emails and sent them to Daniel and Claire, then logged out of the server and shut down my computer. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of calm. We had her. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Daniel. "Claire's filing the complaint today. Be ready." I got dressed quickly, my mind buzzing with anticipation. Today was the day everything would change. But as I was heading out the door, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Ethan Carter," a man's voice said. "Yes. This is Detective Harris with the NYPD. We need you to come down to the station for questioning." My blood ran cold. "Questioning? About what?" "We've received a report of unauthorized access to Sterling Tech servers." We'd like to ask you a few questions. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding. Victoria had beaten me to the punch. Ethan thought he had the upper hand. But Victoria was always one step ahead. Now, with the police involved, the stakes were higher than ever. I stood frozen in my doorway, the phone still clutched in my hand. The detective's words echoed in my mind like a death knell. Unauthorized access. Questioning. Victoria had outmaneuvered me, and now I was the one under investigation. My first instinct was to call Daniel. He answered on the first ring, his voice tense. Ethan? What's going on? The police just called, I said, my voice shaking. They want me to come in for questioning. Victoria's accusing me of hacking into the company's servers. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Daniel said, don't say a word to them. Not until we get a lawyer involved. Claire? I asked. No, Daniel said firmly. This is criminal. We need someone who specializes in this kind of thing. I'll make some calls. In the meantime, don't go anywhere near the police station. Let them come to you if they want to talk. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay, what about the emails? Did Claire file the complaint? Not yet, Daniel said. She's waiting for us to give the go-ahead. But if the police are already involved, we need to be careful. One wrong move, and this could blow up in our faces. I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. What do we do? We fight, Daniel said. But we fight smart. Let me handle the legal side. You just stay put and keep your head down. The next few hours were a blur. Daniel arranged for a criminal defense attorney named Marcus Reed to represent me. Marcus was a no-nonsense guy with a reputation for winning tough cases, and he didn't waste any time getting to work. Here's the deal, Marcus said when we met at his office later that day. Victoria's trying to frame you for hacking. If she can prove you accessed the servers without authorization, you could be looking at serious charges. But if we can prove she's the one who's been breaking the law, we can turn this around. How do we do that? I asked. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes sharp. We need evidence. Hard evidence. The emails you found are a good start, but they're not enough. We need something that ties her directly to the misconduct. Something that proves she knew what she was doing was illegal. I nodded, my mind racing. What about the CFO? He was in on it too. If we can get him to talk. Marcus held up a hand. That's a possibility. But we need to be careful. If we approach him the wrong way, he could tip off Victoria, and then we're back to square one. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with possibilities. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Something obvious. And then it hit me, the whistleblower policy. Every company had one, a way for employees to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. If I could use that to my advantage, maybe I could force Victoria's hand. I called Daniel first thing in the morning and pitched him the idea. It's risky, he said, but it might work. If we can get someone inside the company to come forward, it could blow the whole thing wide open. Exactly, I said. But who? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Daniel said, what about Sarah? Sarah, my former assistant. She'd been with the company for years, and she'd seen firsthand how Victoria operated. If anyone would be willing to speak up, it was her. I met Sarah at a coffee shop later that day. She looked nervous, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup as she sat across from me. Ethan, she said quietly. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Thanks, Sarah. Look, I know this is a lot to ask, but I need your help. Victoria's been breaking the law, and if we don't stop her, she's going to keep getting away with it. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. What do you want me to do? File a whistleblower complaint, I said. Tell the truth about what's been going on. If you do, I'll make sure you're protected. She bit her lip, her expression torn. I don't know, Ethan. If she finds out. She won't, I said firmly. We'll make sure of it. Sarah was silent for a long time. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. With Sarah on board, Ethan and Daniel had a chance to take down Victoria for good. But as the pieces fell into place, one question remained. Would it be enough? Sarah's whistleblower complaint was filed the next morning. Claire and Marcus worked together to ensure it was airtight, detailing every instance of Victoria's misconduct, from the manipulated earnings reports to the toxic work environment she'd cultivated. The complaint was sent to the company's board of directors, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and even a few well-connected journalists. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By midday, the office was in chaos. Employees whispered in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward Victoria's office as if expecting her to burst out at any moment. The board called an emergency meeting, and Victoria was summoned to explain herself. I watched it all unfold from a distance, my phone buzzing constantly with updates from Daniel and Sarah. It felt surreal, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. But there was no satisfaction in it, just a hollow ache in my chest. Then, around 3 p.m., I got a call from Marcus. "It's done," he said. "Victoria has been suspended pending an investigation. The board is taking this seriously." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "What happens now?" "Now we wait," Marcus said. "But this isn't over, Ethan. Victoria is not going down without a fight." He was right. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering and media scrutiny. Victoria's suspension made headlines, and the story spread like wildfire. Reporters dug into her past, uncovering a trail of broken careers and shattered lives. But Victoria wasn't the type to go quietly. She fought back with everything she had, using her connections and resources to spin the narrative in her favor. She accused me of orchestrating the whole thing out of spite, painting herself as the victim of a malicious smear campaign. It worked, at least for a while. Public opinion was divided, and the board began to waver. Without concrete evidence tying Victoria directly to the misconduct, the investigation stalled. Then, on the 5th day, everything changed. Sarah called me early in the morning, her voice trembling with excitement. "Ethan, you need to see this." She sent me a file, a recording of a conversation between Victoria and the CFO. It was damning. "We need to make those numbers look better," Victoria's voice said, cold and calculating. "I don't care how you do it. Just get it done." The CFO hesitated. "Victoria, if anyone finds out—" "They won't," she snapped. "Not if you do your job." I played the recording for Daniel and Marcus, my hands shaking. "This is it," I said. "This is what we've been waiting for." Marcus nodded, a grim smile on his face. "It's enough to bury her." The recording was leaked to the press that afternoon. Within hours, it was everywhere: news outlets, social media, even the stock market. Sterling Tech shares plummeted, and the board had no choice but to act. Victoria was fired that evening. Victoria was gone, but the battle had taken its toll. As Ethan picked up the pieces, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was just beginning. The days after Victoria's firing were a strange mix of relief and unease. On the surface, everything seemed to settle. The office buzzed with a nervous energy, like a storm had passed, but no one was quite sure if the damage was done. People avoided talking about her, but her absence was palpable, a void that no one dared to fill. I returned to work, but it wasn't the same. The desk I'd sat at for years felt foreign, and the stares from my coworkers were a constant reminder that I was no longer just Ethan Carter, the sales guy. I was Ethan Carter, the guy who took down Victoria Sterling. Daniel called me the night after the news broke. "You did it," he said, his voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Pride, maybe, or exhaustion. "We did it," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done this without you." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Daniel said, "What's next?" I didn't have an answer. The board offered me a promotion, a senior role with a corner office, and a hefty salary bump. It was everything I'd worked for, everything I thought I wanted. But when I sat in that office for the first time, staring out at the skyline, I felt nothing. Victoria's shadow still loomed over the company. Her name was whispered in the halls, her legacy etched into the walls like graffiti. The board wanted me to help rebuild, to restore trust and morale, but I wasn't sure I was the right person for the job. And then there was Sarah. She'd been my ally, my confidant, but now she avoided me. When I finally cornered her in the break room, she looked at me with a mix of guilt and fear. "I can't do this anymore, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but now, I don't know. I feel like I've made a deal with the devil." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What are you talking about?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I just want my life back." The cracks started to show soon after. First, it was the emails. Anonymous messages began circulating, accusing me of manipulating the situation to get ahead. Then came the rumors, whispers that I'd orchestrated the whole thing to take Victoria's job. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the work, but the weight of it all was crushing. The promotion that had once felt like a victory now felt like a curse. And then one night I got a call from Marcus. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice grim. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "Victoria's lawyered up. She's suing the company, and you, for defamation and wrongful termination." I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. "On what grounds?" "She's claiming the recording was fabricated," Marcus said. "And she's got experts willing to testify." The lawsuit was the final blow. The board, already reeling from the scandal, began to distance themselves from me. My once promising career was crumbling before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I called Daniel, desperate for advice, but he was distant, his tone guarded. I warned you this wouldn't be easy, he said, but I didn't think it would go this far. What do I do? I asked, my voice breaking. There was a long pause. Then Daniel said, you fight, or you walk away. But either way, you need to decide what's worth fighting for. I spent the next few days in a fog, trying to make sense of it all. The promotion, the lawsuit, the whispers, it was too much. And then one morning I made my decision. I walked into the boardroom, my resignation letter in hand, and faced the people who had once hailed me as a hero. I can't do this anymore, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now, I don't know what's right anymore. The room was silent as I turned and walked out. Ethan walked away, but the battle wasn't over. As he tried to rebuild his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria's shadow still loomed over him. And then one day, she reached out. The weeks after I left Sterling Tech were a blur. I spent most of my time at home, avoiding the news and the endless stream of messages from former colleagues. Some were supportive, offering words of encouragement or job leads. Others were less kind, accusing me of abandoning the company when it needed me most. I didn't respond to any of them. Daniel checked in on me occasionally, but even those conversations felt strained. There was an unspoken tension between us, a question neither of us wanted to ask. Was it worth it? And then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. We need to talk. I opened it, my heart pounding. Asterisk Ethan, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but we need to talk. What happened between us, it doesn't have to be the end. Meet me at the usual spot tomorrow at noon. Victoria. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. The usual spot. She meant the bar where Daniel and I had met to plan her downfall. Was this some kind of twisted joke? A trap? I showed the email to Daniel when he came over that evening. He read it twice, his expression unreadable. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. What would you do? He hesitated, then said, I'd go. But I'd be careful. The next day, I arrived at the bar a few minutes early. It was empty except for the bartender, who nodded at me as I walked in. I took a seat in the corner booth, my hands clenched into fists under the table. Victoria walked in exactly at noon. She looked different, smaller, somehow, without the armor of her designer suits and sharp heels. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple black dress that made her look almost human. She slid into the booth across from me, her eyes scanning my face. You came? I came, I said. What do you want, Victoria? She sighed, leaning back in her seat. I want to end this. The lawsuits, the fighting, it's destroying both of us. I raised an eyebrow. You're the one who started it. Maybe, she admitted. But I'm not the one who's going to finish it. I stared at her, trying to figure out her angle. What are you saying? She leaned forward, her voice low. I'm saying we're both casualties of this war, Ethan. And if we keep fighting, there won't be anything left of either of us. I didn't respond. She reached in her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table to me. This is a settlement offer. Drop the whistleblower complaint, and I'll drop the lawsuit. We both walk away. I unfolded the paper and scanned it quickly. The terms were generous, more than generous. But there was a catch. You want me to sign an NDA? I said, looking up at her. She nodded. No more interviews, no more leaks, no more digging up the past. We both move on. I folded the paper and set it back on the table. And if I say no? She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we both lose. I left the bar without giving her an answer. The settlement offer sat on my kitchen table for days, taunting me. It was tempting, too tempting, but signing it would mean letting go of everything I'd fought for, everything I'd sacrificed. And then, one night I made my decision. I called Daniel and asked him to meet me at the bar. When he arrived, I handed him the settlement offer. What's this? He asked, frowning. Victoria's way out, I said, but I'm not taking it. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. I'm going to fight. Not for revenge, not for the job, but for the truth. Because if I don't, she wins. And I can't let that happen. Daniel nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Then I'm with you. Ethan and Daniel were ready to take on Victoria one last time. But as the final battle loomed, one question remained. Who would come out on top? The decision to reject Victoria's settlement offer wasn't just about pride or principle. It was about closure. I needed to see this through to the end, no matter the cost. Daniel and I spent the next few weeks preparing for what would be the final showdown. We dug deeper than ever before, uncovering documents, emails, and financial records that painted a damning picture of Victoria's misconduct. Claire, our lawyer, worked tirelessly to compile the evidence into a case that even the most skeptical judge couldn't ignore. But Victoria wasn't idle. Her legal team fought back with everything they had, filing motions to dismiss, challenging the admissibility of evidence, and dragging out the process in hopes of wearing us down. The media, once so eager to cover the scandal, began to lose interest, and public opinion shifted once again. "She's playing the long game," Daniel said one evening as we reviewed the latest court filings. "She's betting we'll run out of steam before she does. Then we'll have to prove her wrong," I said, though even I could hear the exhaustion in my voice. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in early December. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former colleagues, and curious onlookers, all eager to see how the drama would unfold. Victoria sat at the defendant's table, her expression unreadable. She looked as polished as ever, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The first day was brutal. Her lawyers attacked our credibility, painting me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. They called witnesses who testified to my unstable behavior and questionable motives, and by the end of the day, I felt like I was on trial instead of her. But then it was our turn. Claire called Sarah to the stand, and for the first time, the courtroom fell silent. "Can you describe the work environment under Victoria Sterling's leadership?" Claire asked. Sarah hesitated, then said, "It was toxic. She ruled by fear. If you didn't do exactly what she wanted, she'd make your life a living hell." "And did you ever witness Miss Sterling engaging in unethical or illegal behaviors?" Sarah nodded. "Yes. She manipulated financial reports, pressured employees to lie to clients, and retaliated against anyone who questioned her." The room erupted in murmurs, and Victoria's lawyers objected, but the damage was done. Over the next few days, we presented our case piece by piece, each revelation more damning than the last. The recording of Victoria and the CFO was played in open court, and even the judge seemed stunned by her cold, calculating tone. But the real turning point came when Daniel took the stand. "Why did you get involved in this case?" Claire asked him. Daniel looked at me, then at Victoria, his expression grim. "Because I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy people anymore. She's not just a bad boss. She's a predator. And if we don't stop her, she'll keep doing it." Victoria's lawyers objected, but the words hung in the air like a verdict. The trial lasted 2 weeks, and by the end, even the reporters seemed exhausted. The jury deliberated for 3 days, and when they finally returned with a verdict, the tension in the room was palpable. "We find the defendant, Victoria Sterling, guilty of fraud, misconduct, and wrongful termination," the foreperson said, their voice steady. The room erupted. Victoria didn't react at first. She just sat there, her face a mask of disbelief. Then, slowly, she turned to look at me, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and something else, something that almost looked like respect. Victoria was found guilty, but the battle had taken its toll. As Ethan tried to move on, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real cost of victory was yet to be paid. The verdict should have felt like a victory. Victoria was found guilty, her career in ruins, and the company was forced to overhaul its policies to prevent something like this from happening again. But as I sat in the courtroom, watching her being led away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. The weeks that followed were a blur. The media hailed me as a whistleblower hero, but the attention was suffocating. Every interview, every article, every tweet felt like another layer of pressure I hadn't asked for. I tried to focus on rebuilding my life, but it was hard to move forward when the past kept pulling me back. Daniel tried to help. He'd been my rock through the entire ordeal, but even he seemed distant now, like he wasn't sure how to navigate this new reality. "You did the right thing," he said one evening as we sat on my couch, staring at the muted TV. "But you can't keep punishing yourself for it." "I'm not punishing myself," I said, though even I didn't believe it. He gave me a look. "Then why are you still here, hiding from the world?" I didn't have an answer. The turning point came one rainy afternoon when I received a letter in the mail. It was from Victoria. I stared at the envelope for a long time, my hands trembling. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to pretend I'd never seen it. But curiosity won out, and I opened it. Asterisk Ethan, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I needed to say something, to put it into words, even if it's too late. What I did was wrong. I see that now. I was so focused on winning, on being the best, that I lost sight of what really mattered. I hurt people, good people, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. But you were different. You stood up to me when no one else would. You forced me to see the truth, even if it destroyed me in the process. And for that, I owe you more than I can ever repay. I don't know what the future holds for either of us, but I hope you find peace. You deserve it. Victoria, asterisk. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and set it aside. My emotions were a tangled mess. Anger, sadness, even a flicker of pity. But mostly, I felt relief. The next morning I called Daniel. I'm leaving, I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Leaving? What do you mean? I'm done, I said. With all of it. The lawsuits, the media, the drama. I need to start over somewhere new. Daniel was silent for a moment, then said, Where will you go? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'll figure it out. A month later, I packed up my apartment and left the city. I didn't have a plan, just a vague idea of heading west and seeing where the road took me. The first few weeks were strange. I'd spent so long defined by the battle with Victoria that I wasn't sure who I was without it. But slowly, I began to find my footing. I took odd jobs, met new people, and started to rebuild my life on my own terms. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything that had happened threatened to crush me. But there were also moments of peace, of clarity, when I felt like I was finally moving forward instead of looking back. Ethan found a new life, but the past was never far behind. And when a familiar face showed up on his doorstep one day, he realized the battle wasn't over after all. It was a crisp autumn morning when the knock came at my door. I was living in a small town in Oregon, working at a local bookstore and renting a cozy cabin on the edge of the woods. Life was simple, quiet, and exactly what I needed after years of chaos. But that knock changed everything. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there, his hands shoved into the pockets of his coat, his breath visible in the cold air. He looked older, more tired, but his smile was the same, warm and familiar. Hey, Ethan, he said. I stared at him, too stunned to speak. Daniel? What are you doing here? He shrugged. I figured it was time to check on you. See how you're doing. I stepped aside to let him in, my mind racing. Daniel, and I hadn't spoken much since I'd left the city. I'd sent him a few texts to let him know I was okay, but we'd both been busy rebuilding our lives. Seeing him now, standing in my living room, felt surreal. How did you find me? I asked as I handed him a cup of coffee. He grinned. You're not as hard to track down as you think. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us comfortable but charged. Finally, Daniel broke it. I got a call from Claire last week, he said. Victoria's appeal was denied. It's over, Ethan. For real this time. I nodded, the news settling over me like a heavy blanket. Good. Daniel studied me, his expression serious. Are you okay? Really okay? I thought about it for a moment, then said, I'm getting there. It's not easy, but I'm trying. He nodded, his eyes softening. That's all any of us can do. We spent the next few days catching up, hiking through the woods, and talking late into the night. It was like old times, but different, lighter somehow. The weight of the past was still there, but it didn't feel as crushing anymore. On his last day, Daniel handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked, frowning. Open it, he said. Inside was a check for a substantial amount of money, along with a note from Claire. Asterisk, Ethan. This is your share of the settlement from Sterling Tech. The board finally agreed to compensate you for everything you went through. It's not enough, but it's a start. Take care of yourself. Claire. Asterisk. I stared at the check, my throat tight. I don't know what to say. Daniel clapped me on the shoulder. Say you'll use it to do something good. For yourself, for someone else, it doesn't matter. Just don't let it go to waste. After Daniel left, I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the trees. The check was still in my hand, but my mind was elsewhere. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. I could stay here, in this quiet little town, and build a life far removed from the chaos of my past. Or I could take the money, go back to the city, and start something new, something that mattered. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but that was okay. For now, it was enough to know that I had options, that I wasn't defined by what had happened to me, but by what I chose to do next. Ethan's journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like he was in control. And as he looked out at the horizon, he knew that whatever came next, he was ready to face it. What do you think Ethan should do next? Should he stay in a quiet town, or return to the city and start something new? Let me know in the comments.